joined by the Senior Associate Director of Athletics at Cal State Bakersfield and the chair of the NCAA Division I Wrestling Committee, Karen Langston. And we will go, you know the deal now, just raise your hand if you have any questions. And we will get started with Jacob Fariat from the Daily Collegian.
Yeah, Karen, thanks for doing this. Obviously here we are a year later and, coronavirus very much still a thing, pandemic, very much still raging on, I don't know if it's like information that you're privy to necessarily, but what makes you confident that, these championships can occur sort of as safely as possible and that it's safe to do so this year, when maybe it wasn't safe to do so last year?
Well, I think we've learned a lot in the last 12 months, and it's been certainly difficult. It was a really devastating time for a lot of young people last year with the sudden cancellation of not just wrestling, but sports across the board. And I know that administrators, everyone across the medical community that we work with on our campus, and I know throughout the NCAA, have worked very hard to learn as much as we can and to provide a safe environment. I do think that we have created a really solid plan to make sure that we have a great testing, robust testing program in place, and that we can monitor. I know a number of the wrestling programs have been able to successfully do that in their own environments throughout the season. And I'm confident that we have a good plan in place. We've contracted with a medical company to oversee our testing and contact tracing, which is, an entirely additional layer of planning for the championship, and working alongside the NCAA offices have worked alongside the St. Louis Public Health. And, I'm confident it's going to be a great tournament.
Mike Willis with USA Wrestling.
Hey, Karen. We're living in unprecedented times, really. What was it like trying to figure this out and sort of execute when there really wasn't, a playbook on how to do this or a similar situation you could point to kind of follow the lead?
Boy, I know that this will probably be the beginning of many of my answers, but this is something that we've never seen before. We weren't prepared for it really, and didn't in the beginning. We just tried to learn as fast as we could, and so many of us who are involved in the business of college athletics are former athletes, and so we did what we always do. We just faced the challenge head on, dug in, learned as much as we could, and tried to create an environment where we could do the thing that we do, which is to create an environment where young people can, chase their dreams, do what they love, and do it safely. And so it was definitely hard. I will not lie. It was really, really difficult all along the way, including through yesterday morning as we were finalizing brackets. It's just, you have to think through everything in a really different way. Most things take longer than they did before. A lot of things we knew how to do on autopilot, we have to be really conscientious and careful about. And so it's been really challenging, but nothing that we wouldn't do on behalf of our student athletes, certainly in the sport of wrestling, but across all of our sports, to try to get back out there safely and do what we all love.
Jake?
Yeah, Karen, given just even the nature of the sport, wrestling is, it's similar to obviously football and hockey and a lot of the other contact sports, and that you're in close proximity, but wrestling, maybe even more so, so given the inherent nature of the sport, what extra challenges has that presented?
I think we just have to be more careful, but the good news is we've been more careful, and I just think we've learned a lot. And so I know, I can talk in more detail about what our team is doing specifically, but they're testing every day, and we're monitoring their, we're monitoring their health every single day. And they've made an enormous commitment throughout the season to stay in their pods and in their bubbles, and to stay COVID free, because they understand the impact that that makes if they don't on not only themselves, their families, their teammates, the rest of our student athletes, our staff. And so I really, I am very much impressed by the way our student athletes have participated in following the rules that we've asked them to follow, which are very difficult. Again, they're doing things they've never had to consider, and but they've really stepped up to the challenge, and that's made it I wouldn't say easier, but it's definitely made it more doable for us to have really responsible and responsive young people that are doing their best to follow the guidelines.
Jake, go ahead if you've got a follow-up.
Yeah, this is sort of, it's related, but it has less to do with like the actual virus itself. But, you look at the impact the coronavirus has had, financially on a lot of institutions, and, they've had to make some cuts. You've seen Fresno State, Stanford, Old Dominion cut their wrestling programs. For you as the chair of the wrestling committee, I mean, are there legitimate concerns about viability going forward?
I personally, I mean, as an administrator in the college athletics enterprise, when teams are discontinued, it's really devastating. It's never an easy decision. We went through some of that back in 2010, and it's really tough. And I feel for the administrators that had to go through that decision-making process. For us in Bakersfield, it's not a consideration. We are very much committed to the sport of wrestling, and wrestling is, part of the fabric of our community. And so, on a micro level in our own community, I don't concern myself about the viability of our own program. But, I love the sport of wrestling, and anytime a team is discontinued or is threatened by finances, it's disappointing and it's frustrating, especially being out west and having two California teams in peril right now is just really difficult. But it's just disappointing, and I hope the best for the teams that are if they have opportunities to raise money to maintain their programs. We did that, and we've been able to do that successfully over a number of years, and I hope that others are able to. And I wish more administrators would consider adding the sport of wrestling, because I've gotten so involved in the sport. I've just been immersed in it for the last 4 years as a member of the committee, but as a sport administrator for wrestling since 2011. And I just love the sport. I really think so highly of the athletes in the sport, and hope that it continues to thrive, and continues to grow.
Mike?
So obviously the COVID-19 pandemic has been overwhelmingly negative across pretty much every facet of life. Have you seen like any, silver lining or positive changes or things that were good that came out of this that you weren't expecting to?
Oh, gosh, it might be too soon to know that. I'll just say personally, I consider myself a pretty introspective person. I consider myself, an analyst. I try to be very careful in my decision making and processing, and I hope that we've had. I said this before. We have to think through things more carefully as we make decisions every single day. There's nothing that I think about and decide upon every single day that I don't have to just stop and say, how does this impact our COVID requirements? How are we going to do this virtually? How will we make this work? So I really have had to stop and think about things more carefully. And I think that's healthy for everyone. I mean, we have some big challenges ahead of us as we repopulate our campus and make sure that we're continuing to follow safety guidelines and all those things that we don't contribute to, any additional challenges, outbreaks, or whatever might come ahead of us. But I'm hopeful that we'll continue to just be more careful and thoughtful as we move ahead and make decisions. But I don't know. I think I think we still have a little ways to go before we can really look back and reflect about what we've learned.
Jake?
Yeah, how, because, like we've heard it certainly at the campus level of like, athletic directors learning from other sports and, taking lessons from other sports. You as a sport administrator, I mean, how close is the contact that you have with other sport administrators? And, what have you learned maybe from football or basketball or hockey or just some of the other sports that you've been able to apply to wrestling?
So personally, I am the sport administrator also for volleyball, beach volleyball, and golf. And we have a pretty small leadership team in Bakersfield. And so I also sit on our COVID response team, on our campus. And so, our trainers have led the way for sure in educating all of us about they've created a structure for us to follow the guidelines and help. That has helped us to make good decisions about how we move forward. And we have learned a lot. We learn something more than one thing. We learn a lot every day from a number of different sources. I know our athletics director is on a call. It was at one point daily. I know they're doing it maybe weekly or a couple times a week now with all the other ADs in our conference. And our conference is primarily a California conference. We have all California schools plus Hawaii. And so in our all sport conference. And so again, like I said, we just have dug into all of the new information that's presented to us with focus on remaining safe and getting back to competition or training or whatever it is that we're able to do safely as quickly as we can, with safety being our top priority.
Feel free to raise your hand if there are any additional questions for Karen. Any topic? We'll hold just a quick second here and see if anybody else has anything. All right, we'll see no further questions. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm going to close the meeting, get this recording on what we just had, and then we'll open it back up here shortly for Lou Roselli of Oklahoma at 12 o'clock. So, Karen, thank you so much for joining us.